If you are considering a sabbatical or moving to France, how do you find a great rental? In this video, we're going to give you an overview of your options and tips for things you should look for that you may not expect if you're coming from the USA. Hi, I'm Raina.
And I'm Jason. We're Baguette Bound, an American family of 3 living in the southwest French countryside since 2022. We're going to start with a few terms and definitions that may be new or different to ensure that we're all speaking the same language here.
Yeah. Then we're going to dig into the types of rental properties, who they might be best for, and how to find them.
Okay, new terms. First, the floor count. In France, the ground floor is floor 0. The French begin counting floors from there. So to get to the first floor, you must go up 1 level from the ground floor. This is really important because if you're trying to avoid stairs and you see first floor, that's what Americans would think of as the second floor. You're going to need stairs. And in turn, something on the 4th floor in France is actually like the 5th floor for an American.
Yeah. Next, let's talk about the difference between unfurnished in the US versus unfurnished in France. So, whereas in the US, unfurnished literally just means no furniture, but you're still going to get a fully functional apartment or a house with a fitted kitchen and bathrooms. Like, you know, the kind of place that you could technically just show up with a bed and sleep the first night. That's different here. Yeah. Unfurnished rentals in France have like no minimum level of equipment, including fixtures, and can vary like wildly in what's included. So there could be no refrigerator, no stove, no light fixtures, like just bare bulbs hanging from the ceiling. We have even heard of, in rare cases, no toilet.
Yeah.
So you've got to check the listing to see what's included in an unfurnished property or talk to the listing agent or owner. It could literally just be the kitchen sink.
Okay, next up in a property listing, you may see the property referenced as a T1, T2, T3, T4. These numbers do not signify the number of bedrooms like you'd expect in the US.
We were like, this is some kind of code at first.
We just got to decipher it.
Yeah.
Instead, this is a reference to the number of rooms in the property, not including the kitchen and the bathroom. So for example, a T1 is a 1-room apartment, but with a separate kitchen and a bathroom.
So different than a studio.
Right. A T2 would have 2 rooms, likely a bedroom and a living room, plus the kitchen and bathroom. A T3, a living room, 2 bedrooms, and a T4 could be either 3 bedrooms and a living room, 2 bedrooms, a living room, and a dining room, but it's going to have 4 rooms.
Besides the kitchen and bathrooms.
Right. Now remember, the number stands for the room count. It doesn't always directly correspond to the number of bedrooms.
Right.
Just because the number's bigger doesn't mean that the total size of the apartment is bigger. A T4 could still be smaller than a T3. It just has an extra room in it.
Right.
Now, for the types of rental properties themselves.
We're going to start with short and medium-term furnished rentals because those are usually the first things that you rent to just get yourself to France.
Yeah, these are the best bet if you're looking to get boots on the ground quickly to start your search for a longer-term housing solution. And there are a few different places to look for these. Airbnb or VRBO, they rebranded Verbo.
Yeah.
These are probably the most well-known short-term rental sites for Americans. And these really might be the simplest places to start. Homes are widely available, it's very easy to book from the US, and you can quickly generate proof of address support for your visa application, which is really handy.
Yeah, Airbnb even has a special section for this, which is convenient.
One downside, however, is that they're often a bit more expensive than if you were to find something on the local market. There is a way to minimize this. You can book at least a month to get a better rate. Sometimes this monthly rate discount can be significant, up to 50% less.
Yeah, we were shocked when we first realized that.
To see this, you can change your initial search criteria just to be longer than a month, and the prices should automatically update. Another risk with these properties is they can be a bit unpredictable.
Yeah, this is pretty well known, I think.
Yes. Our first rental in Lyon, when we first arrived, looked great, but it was a rundown dump next to a freeway with a floodlight in the courtyard that came on at various times all night long. And I love the washer that you could only access by sitting on the toilet in the bathroom.
It was an interesting setup.
Yeah.
Yeah. So not quite the like charming French walk-up we were dreaming of.
Not exactly.
For our first place to land in France.
So when choosing a place on these sites, consider what pictures are missing and what reviewers aren't saying in the reviews. If there's no pictures of the second bathroom or the courtyard, it's possible that these areas may look very different from the rest of the home. Be sure to check and see if sheets and towels are included. While this is unheard of in the US, sheets and towels are not always included in European rentals.
Not standard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If an air conditioner, a dryer, a dishwasher, or an elevator are extremely important to you, make sure you confirm their existence on the property.
Right. We often hear, because these are so common in the US, that people assume that they will exist even if they don't see them in the listing. Not so. Many of these are not common in France, and millions of French people live every day just fine without a dryer. So you may try it too. But if this is a deal breaker for you and something you feel you must have, make sure you confirm with the host that it's present in the rental before you book.
Yep.
Okay, so the next great options, which can be more for like medium-term rentals, a few months, are gites and vacation properties during the off-season time of the year when many times they're just sitting empty. So if a gite is a new term for you, it's a standalone, independent, furnished rental, which is often a country house, and it might be part of a larger property that the owner also lives on in a separate building. They are self-catering, meaning you are going to provide all food, consumable products, etc., similar to an Airbnb. But outside of peak months of July and August in France, they are usually quite a bit less expensive than Airbnb for extended stays of a furnished place. They also tend to have a lot of local character, which is very cool. Our first rental here in Southwest France, outside of Saint-Foy-le-Grand, was a gite. It was sitting in the middle of gorgeous vineyards in a little commune.
It's very picturesque.
Very picturesque, right? So we have found that there are essentially 3 ways to find gites and vacation rentals that may rent during the off season for long winter lets, they're commonly called. Okay, the very first way is straight up website listings. 3 really popular sites that you can find these on are longtermrentalsinfrance.com, rentaplaceinfrance.com, and the French equivalent of Craigslist, Le Bon Coin. Did I say it right?
You got it. Le Bon Coin.
Yeah, and you can find all kinds of things on there too, right?
It's fun to search.
Yeah, like when you finally buy your new house, you need a washer or you need random furniture, go there. Okay, so that's a first very straightforward way. The second way is to turn on Google Maps in the area that you are looking for a place in and search for gites. Often if these pop up, you can then Google the name of the property and find either a website, if it exists, or just the owner's contact info. This works great because often these gites, they just don't pop up in SEO Google searches like you might expect US to. So this is kind of like it takes 2 steps, but it's a great way to find them with Google, just in a different manner. Okay, the last way is to find local Facebook groups for the area that you're traveling to or moving to and post what you're looking for in a gite with the needed dates. Often people will find you. This is how we found a rental last year after we had looked at so many places and just had not been able to secure anything. And we kind of found it through word of mouth in this Facebook group. You don't want to underestimate the power of word of mouth in France.
Yeah, so many things are just not on the internet in France.
Right. I mean, it's kind of like, remember in the 90s when a website was like optional and people just like heard about things?
Yeah.
That is still often how it feels to us in France. So that is a great avenue to be able to find something to rent that you might not find on these like aggregating sites.
Definitely. The gites and vacation rentals in France are most available and best priced between October and April. Be aware that not every lovely countryside stone gite is well equipped for winter, so you'll want to confirm the heating arrangements and also who is responsible for the heating bill before you rent.
Ask us how we know this.
Yeah. 2 things to keep in mind. These kind of rentals tend to be outside of major cities most often, and it's also very common to put down a month's rent as a deposit. So if your plans do change or you cancel, you may lose that deposit. If you're in the midst of the immigration process, you also may need to receive mail. So be sure to check with the owner to see if this is possible. It will make your life easier in advance.
This is huge.
Yeah. And if you're worried about not being able to ship your stuff overseas and receive it here in France during that first year, this is okay. Do not panic. There are plenty of storage units in France that you can rent out for this purpose.
Right. So if you're in a furnished rental and you don't have a place to put your stuff.
One last note, for these types of rentals, you'll probably be required to purchase a rental insurance policy. And this is completely normal. It's very easy to do online. And as a bonus, these rental insurance documents can serve as your proof of address to be used in all kinds of transactions in France, from getting a mobile phone to opening a bank account. It's very useful. So if you know that you'll need documentation for proof of residence, this rental insurance can be a really good option.
Yeah. Okay, now we're going to get to the trickiest option, a traditional long-term rental. All right. We're not going to sugarcoat this because this is the most complicated and difficult option to secure, especially if you are dreaming of being in a high demand area like Paris or Nice, but it's not impossible.
It's not. Disclaimer, we've never rented an apartment or house long-term in France. So we're putting this together based on what we know from reading the French laws, other expat experiences, and information that we've gathered from local sources here on the ground. Here in France, we have never seen the large company-owned apartment complexes that are very, very common in the US. These usually allow you to rent an apartment online months in advance. You can visit the leasing office, get a tour, and rent in advance as well.
You know, those huge mid-rises with a pool that are owned by like 6 companies in the US.
Right.
All
we just
over.
have never seen anything like that. Instead, long-term rentals are made either with the individual owner of a property or through a real estate agency that leases the property on behalf of the owner. You can find rentals listed on many of the French property websites like SeLoger or Leboncoin. And you can work directly with real estate agents that will show you properties for rent. There are 2 basic types of long-term rentals, furnished and unfurnished. A furnished long-term rental are rented for a minimum of 1 year, and they must include all your basic furnishings that would allow you to move in immediately. Although the quality of these furnishings can vary, from college dorm room chic
Might bring back fond memories.
It could be fun.
Yeah, could be fun.
And some are really nice. They might remind you more of a 4-star hotel.
Yeah. Now, the second category are long-term rentals that are unfurnished. We referenced these earlier in the video, of course. So these are rented for a minimum of 3 years. And as we mentioned, have no minimum level of equipment. So remember again to check the listing or talk to an agent to see what's included with the property. Now, those of you in the US who are immediately shocked by the minimum rental period of 3 years and thinking, like, I don't know what's going to happen to my life in that time. How am I going to commit to that? It's okay. Things work differently here than in the US. We can all take a breath. Okay. Yeah. So in France, there's this beautiful, realistic view that when you rent a place, while it's in good faith that you plan to be there for the lease term, life is unpredictable. Maybe you get a better job in a different city. Maybe you get sick. Maybe you need to care for a relative. Maybe you have a baby. Whatever it is, life does change and your housing needs can change. In France, you have options as a tenant. You can give proper notice, which is usually 30 to 90 days, depending on the situation, and then end the rental contract early without like these punitive early termination fees that are super common in the US. We were once forced to pay for an apartment for 6 months after we moved out and then subsidize the next tenant's rent for a year due to like these crazy, but legal in the US, early termination clauses.
Yeah,
so
this was painful.
Oh, it was. So anyway, just know this is not a thing in France. You can take a breath and know that if something happens or changes, you will be able to move without it costing the entire earth. So the flip side of having this flexibility, along with much tougher eviction laws and tenant protections here in France, means that landlords are, reasonably so, very careful when choosing tenants. This is where it can get really tricky.
Yeah, I mean, of course, French landlords want assurances that the tenant will be able to pay their rent. Usually they do this by looking for 2 things, a French job, a guarantor, or both. Yeah. As there aren't traditional American credit scores in France, and it's much more difficult to be fired than in the US, having a work contract is the ideal proof of both income and stability for a landlord.
That's the golden ticket, man.
Yep. A guarantor is someone who pledges to pay the rent to the landlord should the tenant be unable to pay. So maybe you're lucky enough to have friends or family in France who are willing to act as a guarantor on your behalf.
Buy them a bottle of wine.
Absolutely. But if not, there are companies who you can pay to act in this capacity for you. And while we haven't used any of these guarantor companies personally, we do have one on our Moving to France resource list that we've received recommendation for from others.
So if you're in the market for a long-term rental, where do you start? The very first thing you're going to need is to start to put together your dossier. This is just a file with all the documentation that the landlord is going to require from you when you apply to rent a property. So, I mean, basically what you're trying to do with this file is convince the landlord that you are the safest, best choice to rent their apartment.
Yeah.
At minimum, that's going to require proof of identity, your ID card or passport, proof of current address that is less than 6 months old. This could be an electricity bill or maybe that rental insurance contract that we talked about earlier if you're in a short-term rental. Your last tax notice, if you have been in France long enough to have one. If not, this is going to be your US tax return. You're also going to need proof of your last 3 rent payments. So make sure that you are getting rent receipts each month as you're paying, even if you're in a short-term or medium-term rental. In lieu of this, you can also provide home ownership, which can explain why you haven't been making rental payments if you're coming straight here.
Yeah. In addition, depending on your situation, the additional requirements can vary. For example, if you're an expat, you will need to provide your carte de séjour or your residency card. If you're a student, you should include a student ID card and a course registration certificate to show that you're still actively in school.
If you're employed or currently working, of course, it's going to be your work contract along with your last 3 payslips. For business owners or those of you who are self-employed, like us, it's going to be your SIREN or SIRET certificate, which is proof that your business is registered legally in France. And this is the kicker, a minimum of 3 years of tax notices showing stable and sustainable income. If you're retired or unemployed, you can show proof of pension or retirement income with your last 3 pension receipts or probably bank statements.
Yeah, that can work. Now, there are specific laws regarding exactly what specific documentation a landlord can and cannot ask for.
Yes.
But getting deep into the weeds of French housing law is too big to even cover in this video.
Right.
So if you're contemplating a long-term rental, you should definitely search online for the documentation that landlords can legally ask for and begin assembling your paperwork.
Yeah. Just what we want you to know is don't assume it's the same as the US because it is different in most of the ways that we've seen, at least for tenants, usually better.
Yeah.
Okay. So we've already mentioned this, but competition for these long-term apartments in popular parts of France is going to be fierce, and you should just know that going into it.
Yeah.
Even French people often find this difficult in areas of France. So some apartments are even going to come on the market and just be gone within hours. So what we want you to know is you're going to need to be prepared to move quickly.
Yeah, very important. I mean, you'll likely either need to be here on the ground, ready to commit immediately, or if you want this to be done before you arrive in France, you may want to consider hiring a well-regarded and connected local broker to act on your behalf. They will be able to act quickly when something comes on the market, communicate with the landlord in French, which is useful. Yeah. Probably do a virtual tour with you and submit your dossier to the landlord extremely fast.
Right.
Expat Facebook groups are really a great place to find local referrals for agents who are working in local communities on this kind of service.
Yeah. So it's not impossible to secure a long-term rental in France of this type. So bon courage, but be prepared. It's probably going to require patience and persistence on your part.
Our Move to France resource list has all the websites we talked about in this video, so if you haven't already, you can click on the link down below and download it.
Thanks for watching.
A biento.